Some stories don't begin with answers. They begin with a quiet walk and a road that changes its mind. Tonight's story is not about miracles the way people like to tell them. There are no lessons written in bold that no neat explanations waiting at the end. It's about a moment that shouldn't have happened, and yet did. A child walking home, a danger that arrived without warning, and protection that came from the last place anyone would expect. As you listen, don't try to understand everything. Don't rush to decide what it means. Just stay with the silence between events, the waiting, the watching. Because sometimes the most important part of a story is not what acts, but what chooses not to. Take a breath, lower the lights, and let me tell you what happened after dark. There are some walks you remember not because of where they led you, but because of where they almost did. I didn't know that then. I was 12. I thought the road home was just a road. Every afternoon, after the school bell rang, I followed the same path. It curved past the low hills, cut through tall grass that whispered when the wind moved through it, and then narrowed into a dirt trail leading toward our village. I had walked it so many times that my feet moved without asking me. That day, the sun was low but not yet tired. The air smelled dry, like dust and leaves warming themselves. I remember counting my steps. I remember thinking about nothing at all. That's how it usually happens. When people ask me later if there were signs, if I felt something wrong, I disappoint them. There was no warning. No sense of dread. No voice telling me to turn back. Only hands. Too many. Too sudden. They came from behind and from the side, as if the land itself had opened. I didn't see their faces at first. I felt fingers dig into my arms, my shoulder, my hair. Someone covered my mouth. Another pulled at my bag until the strap tore and fell into the dirt. I remember the sound I made. Not a scream, not a word, just air forced out of me. They dragged me off the path. My shoes scraped against the ground, kicked loose stones. I tried to grab at the grass, at anything, but the earth didn't hold me. The wind carried my voice away like it was nothing. I learned that day how quiet a person can disappear. They took me to a hut that hadn't been used in a long time. The roof sagged. Light leaked in through gaps in the walls. The floor was packed dirt, cool in some places, warm in others. It smelled of old smoke and animals that had once sheltered there. They pushed me inside. I don't remember every word they said. I remember the tone. Casual. Certain. As if this was already decided somewhere, long before I was born. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough. They were not lost. They were not confused. They had come for me. When they left the hut, they tied the door shut with rope and leaned a piece of wood across it. The light dimmed. Dust floated slowly in the air like it had all the time in the world. I sat on the ground and pressed my hands against my knees so hard they hurt. I told myself to stay small. I told myself not to cry, because crying uses energy, and I didn't know how long I would need mine. The first night came quietly. I watched the light fade through the cracks in the wall until the hut turned into a shape without edges. Sounds from outside grew louder. Crickets, distant calls, the movement of something unseen through grass. I waited for someone to come. Anyone. No one did. The days blurred, but certain things stayed sharp. The way my throat burned when I swallowed. The way the hut smelled different in the heat of midday than it did in the cold just before dawn. The way fear changes shape, how it starts loud and frantic, then settles into something heavier and slower. On the second day, I stopped expecting rescue. Expectation is dangerous. It makes promises your body can't keep. I focused instead on small things. The pattern of cracks in the wall. The sound of my own breathing. The way time stretches when you are counting it. Sometimes they came back. Sometimes they didn't. I learned to recognize their footsteps. I learned when to stay silent and when silence didn't matter. I don't want to describe those moments. Not because I can't, but because they don't belong to the story I'm telling you now. What matters is what happened on the seventh day. By then, my sense of time was broken. I woke and slept without knowing which was which. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, lighter, slower, as if parts of me had already decided to leave. That morning, the forest was unusually quiet. No insects, no birds. At first, I thought it was only in my head. Fear has a way of turning absence into threat. But the quiet stayed. It pressed against the hut like a held breath. Then I heard something else. Footsteps, but not the kind I had learned to fear. Heavier, measured, unhurried. They circled the hut. I pressed myself against the wall, heart beating so hard I was sure it would give me away. My mind searched for explanations and found none that helped. And then there was a sound I knew, even though I had never heard it this close before. A low rumble, not loud, not angry. Alive. The rope outside scraped as something brushed against it. Shadows moved across the cracks in the wall, wide, deliberate, unmistakably not human. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Fear had closed my throat like a fist. The door shifted. Not opened. Just tested. Then another sound joined the first. And another. 3. I understood without understanding. The way you understand fire without touching it. Lions. I curled inward and waited for pain. For teeth. For the end. But it didn't come. Minutes passed. Or hours. Time had lost its shape again. The sounds outside settled. The low rumbling softened into something almost steady, like breathing. Occasionally, a heavy step would move, then stop. Always close. Always there. At some point, exhaustion took me. Not sleep, something thinner. A floating. I drifted in and out, aware of warmth returning to my fingers, of fear slowly loosening its grip, confused by the fact that I was still alive. When I woke fully, light was spilling through the cracks again. Morning light. The hut was the same. I was the same. But outside, the presence remained. I could feel it the way you feel someone standing behind you, even without turning around. They did not enter. They did not leave. They stayed. I didn't know then that this was the moment people would talk about later. I didn't know this would become a story passed from mouth to mouth, reshaped each time. All I knew was this. Something that could have killed me had chosen not to. And in the quiet that followed, for the first time in 7 days, I stopped waiting to disappear. At first, I thought they would leave when the sun rose higher. Animals move with hunger and heat. That's what I had been taught. I expected them to drift away once the day grew warm, once whatever curiosity had brought them near was satisfied. But they didn't. The presence outside the hut didn't thin or fade. It settled. I became aware of their positions the way you become aware of furniture in a dark room, by memory, by instinct, by the way sound changes when it hits something solid. One was close to the door, another somewhere to the side, the third farther back, but still near enough that the air itself seemed occupied. They weren't pacing. They weren't restless. They were stationed. The word came to me without invitation. Stationed. Like guards. Like something had been assigned. Every so often, one of them shifted. A paw pressed into dirt. A body adjusted its weight. Once, I heard the dry scrape of claws against the ground, slow and deliberate. No growling, no snarling, no hunger in the sound. Just awareness. I held my breath without realizing it until my chest burned. When I finally exhaled, the sound felt too loud. I waited for a reaction. None came. I whispered then. Not words. Just sound. A test. My voice came out thin and cracked, unfamiliar to me. Still nothing. I began to understand something dangerous. They were not reacting to me. They already knew I was there. The hut grew warmer as the day stretched on. Dust floated lazily in the beams of light slipping through the walls. My body ached in places I didn't have names for. Hunger pulsed in slow waves, dull and patient. And still they stayed. At some point, I crawled closer to the wall, pressing my ear against the rough surface. Through the thin wood, I could hear breathing. Deep, even, alive in a way that felt ancient. I tried to imagine their faces, their eyes. I had seen lions from far away before, on the edges of fields, at a distance that felt safe because it was distant. But these were close enough that my imagination refused to fill in details. It left them blank, like shapes cut out of the world. I don't know how long passed before the voices returned. Human voices. Laughter first. Loose. Confident. The sound of men who believed the world would step aside for them, as it always had. The footsteps stopped short when they reached the hut. Silence fell. Not the gentle silence of the morning, but a sudden, brittle one. Then shouting. Fear changes the way people speak. It sharpens words, breaks them apart. I heard surprise twist into panic. Someone swore. Someone else yelled a name. I pressed myself into the ground and waited. A roar split the air. Not loud in the way you expect from stories. Not dramatic, not drawn out. It was short, controlled. A warning, not an attack. I heard running. Wild, uneven. Bodies crashing through brush, branches snapping. The sounds retreated quickly, as if pulled away by something stronger than courage. And then nothing. No chase, no pursuit. The lions did not follow. They returned to their places. I shook so hard my teeth clicked together. My hands trembled against the dirt. Fear rushed back into me, hot and overwhelming, but this time it had nowhere to go. It collided with something else, confusion, relief, disbelief, and tangled itself there. They had driven the men away, but they hadn't left. The circle closed more fully then. I could feel it. One moved closer to the door, close enough that its body blocked the light filtering in through the cracks. Another shifted to the opposite side, a living wall. I realized then that I was in the center of something. Not trapped. Held. Hours passed like that. The sun climbed, then began its slow descent. Heat rose and fell. Shadows stretched and withdrew. The lions remained. Once I heard one yawn. The sound was enormous, all jaw and breath and weight. I flinched, heart racing. Nothing followed. Another time, I heard a low sound, almost a purr, but deeper, heavier. It vibrated through the ground into my bones. I don't know when I stopped being afraid of dying. I don't mean that I became brave. I mean that the fear exhausted itself. It ran out of arguments. It had nothing left to show me that I hadn't already seen. In its place came something quieter. Trust. Not the kind you choose. The kind that grows when your body realizes it has survived too long for coincidence. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. For the first time since I had been taken, I slept. Not the drifting, half-falling sleep of exhaustion. Real sleep. The kind where your body loosens its grip on the world. When I woke, the light had changed again. Late afternoon. The air cooler now. My mouth was dry, my stomach aching, but I was alive. Still intact. Still untouched by the thing I had feared most since hearing the first footsteps days ago. I whispered thank you. I don't know who I was speaking to. The lions did not respond. As evening approached, sounds returned to the forest. Insects resumed their quiet work. Birds called from a distance. Life cautiously moved forward. The circle held. It wasn't until the sound of engines reached my ears, distant at first, then closer, that the lions finally stirred with purpose. They lifted their heads. Bodies tensed. The air shifted. Voices followed. Different voices this time. Urgent. Focused. The kind that carried weight, not entitlement. Someone called out. A name I didn't recognize. A question thrown into the forest. The lions stood. For the first time, I felt them fully aware of the world beyond the hut. They moved as one, stepping back just enough to create space, but not breaking the circle entirely. It was as if they were waiting for confirmation. The door was untied. Light flooded in. Hands reached for me, careful, shaking. I flinched at the touch of human skin, surprised by how foreign it felt. Behind them, I saw movement. 3 shapes at the edge of the trees. Tall. Still. Watching. No triumph, no farewell. Just presence. Then, without sound, they turned and slipped back into the forest. Grass parted. Branches closed. The world swallowed them whole. The circle opened. And just like that, it was gone. For a long time after, people spoke for me. Their voices filled the space where my own should have been. They told the story the way people tell stories when they're afraid of silence. Quickly, confidently, smoothing over the parts that don't sit well. They said it was a miracle. They said it was instinct. They said animals can sense innocence or fear or fate. I listened from the edges of rooms, from behind doors, from the back of conversations that didn't ask for my input. Adults debated as if I were not there, as if the girl at the center of the circle had already turned into something else. A symbol, a lesson, a headline. No one asked me what it felt like. Not to be saved, but to be kept. The days after my return were loud. Relatives cried. Neighbors touched my arms and shoulders, grounding themselves in the proof that I was real. People asked questions they didn't want answers to and avoided the ones that mattered. I learned quickly which details made them uncomfortable. I learned when to stop speaking. The lions became the focus. They were easier to look at than what had come before them. Officials came. They asked for the location. They asked how close the animals were. They asked if I was sure there were 3. I was. They nodded, wrote notes, exchanged glances that tried to look calm. Someone said it was unusual, but not impossible. Someone else said the animals must have been confused. Confused. I thought of the way they had positioned themselves. The way they had responded to the men's return with restraint, not chaos. The way they had waited, patiently, for the right moment to leave. Confusion didn't fit, but I didn't argue. I was 12. My body was still sore. My voice still felt like it belonged to someone else. So I stayed quiet. At night, I dreamed of the circle. Not of teeth, not of claws, of warmth, of breathing, of something vast and watchful standing between me and the dark. I woke from those dreams unsettled, not comforted. Protection is a strange thing to remember when it comes from where you were taught to expect danger. As the weeks passed, the world tried to return to its shape. School resumed. Paths were walked again. The hut was torn down. People said it was better that way. I avoided the forest. Not because I feared it, but because I didn't know how to enter a place that had known me in that way and say nothing. Years later, when I was older, I learned the words people preferred. Biology, territory, behavioral anomalies, explanations that sit neatly in books and don't ask anything of you once you close them. I read them all. They explained how lions hunt, how they rest, how they protect their own. None of them explained why they protected me. When I tried to speak about it, to frame it in a way that made sense to others, I felt the story flatten. Something essential slipped away every time I leaned too hard on reason. So I stopped trying to convince. Instead, I remembered. I remembered the sound of their breathing through the wall, the way fear loosened its grip when nothing happened. The moment I realized I was not alone in the way I had been. That is the part people don't understand. They think the lions rescued me. But rescue implies action, urgency, violence interrupted by violence. What they did was quieter than that. They stayed, in a world where staying is rare. I am older now, older than 12 by many years. I have learned that humans like clear boundaries, good and bad, beast and protector, victim and savior. We are uncomfortable when those lines blur. But they blur anyway. I have seen cruelty where there should have been care. I have seen gentleness where instinct said there should be none. When people ask me now if I believe the lions understood what they were doing, I tell them the truth. I don't know. I only know what it felt like to be guarded by something that owed me nothing. The men were never found. That, too, became part of the story people tell. Justice deferred. Questions left open. But that is not the part that wakes me at night. What wakes me is the memory of standing at the edge of the trees days later, looking into the forest and feeling, just for a moment, that I was being watched again. Not hunted. Remembered. I did not go in. Some doors are not meant to be reopened. Some circles close once and are never drawn again. Even now, when I walk alone at dusk and the air grows still, I think of that hut, of the way the forest held its breath, of how safety came from the place I had been taught to fear most. And I wonder, quietly, without asking for an answer, how many times in this world does protection arrive, wearing the face of a beast? By now, the night is quieter than it was when we began. The circle has closed, the forest has moved on, and the story has found its place inside you, not loudly, but gently. There are no answers waiting here, that no final explanation that fits neatly into words. Only a question that lingers longer than it should, about protection, about cruelty, about the strange places kindness sometimes chooses to appear. As you carry this story with you into the dark, remember this. Not everything that watches you is waiting to harm, and not everything that looks human chooses to protect. Some truths don't ask to be solved. They only ask to be remembered. Thank you for listening. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing and joining me for the next quiet tale. And when the night feels too quiet, listen closely. Sometimes, what stayed once is never entirely gone.